The New Orleans Secular Humanist Association welcomes everyone who's interested in exploring ideas from the humanist, non-religious perspective.
For me, secular humanism is a philosophy for living and learning. Secular humanists use science and reason to understand the universe and solve human problems.
As a non-religious person, I cannot accept supernatural answers to life's questions. Secular humanists confine their search for the truth to the natural world.
Some of my highest goals in life are expressed in human secularism. To enjoy life in the here and now, and to strive for moral excellence.
We believe in striving for the best and noblest that is possible in human beings.
These viewpoints reflect our philosophy, which applies to all aspects of our lives. Each of our programs will try to apply reason to various interesting topics and show how this approach differs from the dogma of non-humanist thinking. Hello again. I'm Harry Greenberger, president of the New Orleans Secular Humanist Association and host for this program. We appreciate your being here to watch our show. We have a very interesting guest with us today, and he is the Reverend Clinton Crawshaw. And I'll tell you a little about Clinton, and then we will get around to talking about some things that are of interest to each of us. Reverend Crawshaw was born in Surrey, England in 1970, and when you hear him speak, you will understand I didn't have to tell you that he's from England. He attended Exeter College and St. Stephen's House, Oxford, and after a career in horticulture, was ordained into the Anglican priesthood in 2002. It was his need to reflect truth, especially in issues around human sexuality, that led him to transfer his credentials to metropolitan community churches. He is now pastor of the Big Easy, of course that's New Orleans, Big Easy MCC in New Orleans. Reverend Crawshaw has a passion for the inclusive message of Christianity and the need for the mystical experience in Christianity allied to academic theology. Now, those of you who know who we are may question the purpose for this discussion this morning, but very briefly, some of you don't know who secular humanists are, and I could spend some time explaining it, but just to read one line from our little brochure, which is available to anyone who might want to contact us, and at no cost to you. But one line says, what is secular humanism? And this is what we say. Secular humanism is a philosophy of life that, without supernaturalism, affirms our ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good of humanity. Now, that's who we are. Then the first thing I'd like to ask Reverend Crawshaw is what brought about your decision to come to the United States?
Well, many things, and I can only really explain it authentically from my position, which is obviously going to be different from yours, from a subjective Christian perspective. And I, after transferring my credentials to MCC, I'd had a wonderful week of revival at our intensives course in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, and felt very strongly that I was ready to take on a church pulpit anywhere, actually. It just so happened that MCC is denser on the ground in America than it is elsewhere. And the regional elder, Jim Matulski, asked me to look at several churches. So my partner, Leon, and myself Came back over to the US about a month later on in August last year. So I know what August is like in New Orleans. And we looked at numerous different churches, Key West, Florida, Chattanooga, Tennessee, all over the place. And we finally came to stay with a friend who pastors the church in Baton Rouge, Reverend Keith Mozingo. And we traveled down to New Orleans for the day. And on my way into New Orleans, I bang on a lot about mystical experience, but I can only say that I had a mystical experience approaching the city, and felt very strongly that this was where I needed to be. And also loved the place from a purely human, objective point of view. What's not to like?
I'm glad that you selected us. But when we're talking about you leaving England and Europe and coming to the United States, there is a great difference in the state of religion in Western Europe, because from everything I read, large numbers of people no longer attend church. I understand there are churches and cathedrals that have been converted into condominiums, and that it has lost its predominance in Western Europe. At the same time, in this country, religion, and especially fundamentalist religion, seems to just be greatly empowered. Did any of that influence your decision to come to this country?
Yes and no. I mean, from my perspective as a gay Christian and a gay man who's legally married to my partner, it's actually a lot easier living in England, in the UK, and certainly in North London, where I lived, than it is over here, although New Orleans is something of an island of tolerance surrounded by perhaps less enlightened.
Semi-tolerance,
surrounded by less enlightened views. But from a religious perspective, England is different to continental Europe. Much of continental Europe has what you might call belonging without belief. So church membership and attendance is sometimes quite high, but people will tell you in a survey that they don't actually believe. Britain is kind of the reverse. Attendance and membership is extremely low. And we don't have empty cathedrals, but we certainly have lots of churches which have been turned over to other uses. But the proportion of the population that identify as Christian is still 70-odd%. So it's still pretty high. It's just that they don't choose to put their trust, and certainly not their spiritual and emotional trust, in organized religion. And I'm not entirely sure I blame them.
Well, let me say this. Our organization, while being non-religious, we are not anti-religious.
Indeed.
But what that really means is we're not anti-religious persons. Mm-hmm. There are church organizations and leaders of church organizations that we are opposed to, and apparently
Absolutely.
You would find that justified.
Yes.
What about between England and Europe and the United States regarding race relations? Is there a big difference? Do you see a big difference?
Very, very
there?
different. Very different indeed. I think the caricature about the South is perhaps unfair, as opposed to the North, as I lived in Los Angeles and have traveled around all over the place, and I don't see things dramatically worse here, for example, than in Los Angeles. But my partner is, his family is Jamaican in origin, so we're a interracial couple, which in Britain is just, I mean, the word interracial I didn't come across until I traveled to the US, honestly.
Okay.
In fact, it is the norm in many parts of Britain and in many of our large cities. The majority of people of color will marry outside of their racial background. So 60-odd%, I believe the figure is, of people from a West Indian background, that's a Caribbean to an American, will marry or partner somebody from the indigenous white population of the UK. So intermarriage has been the way integration has really dramatically happened. Because, of course, no matter what
that is the ultimate solution.
Of course it is. And no matter what your initial political views, when your relationship with your grandchild depends upon you abandoning your prejudices,
yes.
Most people will do it.
All right.